gun use and gun violence. And some of that might include permitting requirements, just not the kind of permitting requirements that New York had here, which the court said were simply too strict. And it may still be that states, for example, can impose the kinds of shall issue licensing restrictions that we were just talking about, which are more objective, tend to include things that are more like check the box, as opposed to the kind of more discretionary system that New York had. So I think there are still going to be pathways open, including in New York. It's just that this particular kind of law, which, as the court says, only exists in, depending on how you count it, 6 to 8 states, may be called into question. Now, I should say those are 6 to 8 big states. It includes California, New Jersey. If you put them together, it's about a quarter of the American population lives in those states. So this is still major.
So then what happens in the meantime? You know, we've been talking about Roe v. Wade and how many states have put in these trigger laws that the second Roe v. Wade is overturned. They have laws that will either immediately go into effect or will go into effect in sort of 30 days. I'm trying to understand like what this means for people in New York right now. What happens immediately if you want to carry a gun, I don't know, down Fifth Avenue?
Well, it's going to be really interesting. And I assume that right now, and we already saw the statement from the governor, which you showed the viewers a few moments ago, that the governor, the legislature have already sort of, I think, seen the writing on the wall that this law as currently drafted was going to be struck down. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some new set of differently tailored restrictions put into place. I don't read the court here as saying that from now on, all states are permitless carry, meaning you can just buy a gun and start walking around in public with it. About 20 states have adopted that by statute. That is, they've done away with their own permit requirements. But the court here is not saying that the Second Amendment requires that. Some states have chosen that, and we've seen actually remarkable deregulation of public carry over the past few decades. But that's all just a matter of state political choice. It's not something that's compelled by the Constitution, even after this morning's decision.
We have a statement out from Senator Gillibrand. Today's Supreme Court ruling, which guts state concealed carry permitting laws, is not just irresponsible, it is downright dangerous. Our nation is in the middle of a gun violence epidemic, and instead of working to protect our communities, this court has made it even easier for potentially dangerous people to carry concealed handguns in public spaces. Rebecca Royfee also with us here, our legal analyst, to digest and understand all of this. What about that argument the senator is making?
I think it's a very good argument, but it's not one that's going to convince this particular Supreme Court, and especially not Justice Thomas, who is rooting his decision in history, tradition, the language of the amendment, and he is, to the extent that he's thinking about gun violence, not taking that into account. And so this is a different way, a politician's way, and a politician who is more ideologically on the left way of countering that this decision is bad, but it is not, it's almost like they're speaking different languages.
So we do have CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford standing by for us. Jan, hopefully you've had a little more time also to read the decision. Our guests here have been sort of reading and answering. So I will ask you, as you sort of peruse the decision, what has stood out to you the most?
Well, I mean, I agree with what you guys were just talking about. I mean, the decision itself by Justice Thomas, which 6 of the justices signed on to, all the conservative justices, is highly focused on the history and text behind the Second Amendment and why they believe the core principle of the Second Amendment is that an individual has a right to keep and bear arms to protect themselves. And of course, in 2008, they said you have that right in your home. And now today they're saying you also have that right outside of your home. And then, but again, sort of the point I want to make, the court, you have to count to 5, right? So 3 of the justices wrote separately to say what this decision does not do. And it does not require that states drop their licensing restrictions. This is only to these states like New York and 6 others, if you count one that has since been overturned, that have this extra hoop that you have to jump through that gives judges or law enforcement officers discretion to deny your permit because they don't think you have any special need to get it. So those laws, yeah, they're gutted. New York, California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Hawaii, Illinois, but that was struck down by a different lower appeals court. D.C. had one. So those laws are gone. This doesn't affect the laws in the rest of the country. The question then is, what happens next, right? What other laws can, states pass? And the 3 conservatives and the chief too wrote, 3 of the conservatives and the chief justice joined one of them in separate writings made clear that this case is limited, and they're not willing to go that far. You've got to get 5 votes. And yes, this opinion itself is Thomas. He's out there. He may want to swing for the fences, but you've still got to get the others to come along. And I think today the others are saying this case is about this law, and it is limited, and these other laws have no impact. One other thing I'd like to point out, though, Justice Alito, in his separate writing, said that in response to the dissent by Justice Breyer, who recounted all the mass shootings and just kind of the carnage that we've seen in this country and the ubiquity of guns, Justice Alito said that's precisely why law-abiding citizens should be able to carry a gun outside the home for self-defense. And furthermore, this law in New York was on the books. It was only struck down today. This law was on the books, and it didn't stop the Buffalo massacre. It's not like these mass shooters are going and saying, can I get a permit to carry a gun? So you see this kind of, debate playing out and these reactions, which are, of course, understandable. But then when you look at some of the opinions, the court is saying this is limited.
When we were speaking earlier, Anne-Marie mentioned, in speaking of the potential Supreme Court decision that could potentially strike down abortion rights, that some states have their own laws ready to go to make up for it, should there not be a federal protection. It sounds like what you're saying is, in reading the decisions here, it is limited, it's quite narrow, and so therefore, would there be an opportunity, is there a need for any other state to issue or pass its own gun regulations in the wake of this? It sounds like you're saying that's not necessary.
No, I mean, in the states that have laws like New York, and like I said, there's half a dozen of them, those laws are gone, right? The point is, you can't require someone, a law-abiding citizen who goes through the permit process, takes a training class, fills out all the forms, once they've done that, you can't then say, oh, and by the way, you've got to go to a judge or a sheriff or a law enforcement officer and have them sign off on it, because you've got to also have a special need to get this. Those are the laws that were at issue. There's, like I said, about a half dozen of them. Those are gone. But the court, in the separate writings by the conservatives particularly, suggests, flat out say, this does not mean that states can't require licensing. This is only about that extra hoop that New York has required. A hoop that didn't stop, for example, the Buffalo shooter.
Right. I see Rebecca sort of nodding along. Rebecca, have you had an opportunity to sort of dig into the dissent?
I have, and I mean, one thing that I think is very interesting here is the nature of the decision and how it was made, the majority and the dissent. So having now looked at this is one of the most, I'd say, aggressively originalist decision. There's language in the opinion that suggests that lower courts can't even consider other factors when interpreting the Constitution. And that has a lot, well, if lower courts were to consider that, that would really have a huge amount of impact on other sorts of cases as well. Now, Justice Breyer, you asked about the dissent. He does the exact opposite. He leads in with gun violence. He talks about where we are now as a country and reading the Constitution in light of where we are now as a country. And so this is standing out to me now, in particularly this notion of this difference in methodology. And it's not just a difference of opinion. It may, in fact, turn into a difference that is written into the law, because Justice Thomas uses language saying it's just not permissible to think about those current factors when you're making this decision, while as Justice Breyer is really focusing on us on that. Now, also focusing, again, on the questions that we were talking about before, which is where there is room to still, try to regulate gun use. But, what we really have is a, shout out to ambitious lower court judges who want to issue opinions, wiping clean any sorts of efforts to do this. So I think you can see that competition between the two cases.
One thing a professor from Duke mentioned was that there was some 1,500 Second Amendment cases brought since the Heller decision. So what types of laws, you speak about young, ambitious folks out there with an agenda, what might this give encouragement to? What types of cases?
Well, right. So those cases, you have certain states, as he suggested, that have, said that they, you don't even need a permit to carry a gun. You can go out and carry a gun, open carry a gun in certain states without that. And you could imagine a certain judge reading this opinion, and there would be lots of language in it to support that person in suggesting that, we've been focusing on what a state could do that wants to limit gun rights, but what could a judge do that wants to dismantle those limitations? Well, a lot. I mean, they could read this decision broadly to suggest that this right is not absolute, but very close to that.
There is a lane now, a legal lane created by the Supreme Court with this decision.
Yes.
Jan, you know, we sort of were talking earlier about kind of what the conversation that's happening now with the Supreme Court decision, and also the conversation that's happening in Congress, which is sort of completely different. Not completely different, but we're seeing a shift that we probably could not have anticipated, I don't know, just a month ago before Uvalde. That you have Republicans now championing laws that restrict access to guns to a certain degree. These are, you know, there's specific types of laws, but I'm wondering at all, and I know that the Supreme Court is supposed to remain apolitical, but I wonder if there is any influence, if the winds of change shift for conservatives beyond the conservatives in the Supreme Court, does that have an impact on how they interpret things?
Well, I mean, they're still bound by the cases that came before. So I think we have to look at the cases before this. This is only the third Second Amendment case that we've had in modern history, of course, starting with Heller in 2008, when Justice Scalia, writing for the majority, said that the individual has a right to keep and bear arms inside their home for self-defense. And in that Heller ruling, which was also an originalist ruling, very close to text and history, obviously we know that Thomas and Scalia see many things eye to eye. In that ruling, Heller made very clear and stated quite emphatically that the right, the Second Amendment right, is not unlimited. And then he listed several examples that states could, for example, continue to ban certain types of weapons, could continue to prevent certain types of people from possessing them, could continue to regulate handguns in sensitive locations. This is all in these previous decisions in Heller and then in the subsequent case in McDonald, a case that came from the city of Chicago. So when we look at Thomas's opinion and the history and text, yes, but it also, you have to look at Heller is still standing good law. That right is not, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. And then you have the separate writings from the three other justices, or four, counting the chief who did not write separately but joined one, suggesting some of the things that would still be permissible and how this case does not, you know, affect that at all. Will a lower court judge who's off on a trip of their own see it differently and get some signal that now it's Katie bar the door, it's Wild West again? Maybe. But then that goes through the appellate process. And at some point, it's going to go right back up to the Supreme Court. This is not the last word on this. These gun laws and gun restrictions will come up to the court. So we can only look at what the court has said. The court has no control over these lower courts. And then they'll get another crack at it. But I think some of the stuff in these three decisions now taken together, the court is saying it's not unlimited. This, however, today, you can't do that.
You are watching our continuing coverage of the Supreme Court decision handed down in the past hour, striking down New York's effort to create restrictions on people's ability to obtain weapons. We want to show a comment, a supportive, encouraging comment from a Republican Congresswoman, Elise Stefanik. She's just shared this message. You see it on your screen. Today's Supreme Court ruling upholds the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms and correctly declares New York's shameful attempt to shred Second Amendment rights of New Yorkers unconstitutional. I believe that is the end of the statement. There's no more for us to see. And Jan, there is plenty more. While the far left continues to push, she says, unconstitutional gun control measures as New York's failed bail reform policies have made our communities more unsafe. This ruling comes at a crucial time. Now, law-abiding gun owners in New York State and across the nation can again exercise their constitutional right to concealed carry to protect themselves and their families. Jan, it seems like something you're saying is that this is a limited decision. Who knows what might happen next? But for those encouraged by this, for those who really disagree with the limitations on their Second Amendment right, what likely is their next move after this?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that there are going to be people who say there shouldn't be any kind of permitting process at all, right? And of course, 25 states don't require that. They don't require you to get a permit to carry a gun outside your home. So I'm sure you're going to see people in New York saying we should be like that. But at argument, a lawyer for New York, for the gun owners who are challenging this, said we'd be happy to have a permit process. We just want to have to go through this extra hoop. And the court and some of the conservative justices in their separate writing made clear that permitting processes for concealed carry were not on the table. The court's ruling today is not saying those are unconstitutional. So you're going to see New York State now have a permitting system that's more like, be other states that require that, and they can't require this extra hoop. But yeah, you're going to have people pushing back on that and say, we don't need a permit system at all. And that's going to work out in the political process.
All right. We've had a really good conversation, and we're still awaiting some key decisions. One that has to do with religious expression. Another one, of course, has the possibility of overturning Roe v. Wade. You are looking live at the Supreme Court. I want to thank Rebecca, but I know you're hanging out with us just in case we get any more of these decisions. And Jan as well. We're going to take a little bit of a break for now. We'll be right back.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
Incredibly big!
The metaverse, the virtual world that's become a cryptocurrency casino.
It's like buying property on Mars.
Do they get an actual picture of this? No, it's a digital copy. Why would they pay for that?
Making millionaires almost overnight.
We made more than $1 million in crypto last year.
I have no idea how much money I have made over the past year. That's like, wow!
Big rewards.
There's gold in them, there are hills, as they say.
Bigger risks.
The market's down, but it's gonna bounce back. It's crypto.
Is it a gold rush or fool's gold?
It's our metaverse, our story. Peace out, y'all.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Stream now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
This week on 60 Minutes,
That's incredible.
The 60 Minutes.
60 Minutes, 60 Minutes.
Are you ready for some tough questions?
Let me ask you this.
You know how this sounds.
What's your response to that?
60 Minutes Sundays on CBS.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
Let's get the forecast from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Here we are in our virtual view.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
This is our virtual view, what it actually looks like. Those are some of the best graphics I've seen.
Spare no expense, Gail.
We experience the weather in a whole new way.
Go to the ends of the earth
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
We want to get you to Afghanistan now, where the Taliban is asking for help after a catastrophic earthquake killed at least 1,000 people. Rescue crews have struggled to reach the affected area because of the impassable roads. It is the deadliest quake to strike the country in 20 years, and officials say the death toll will likely rise.
CBS News foreign correspondent Charlie D'Agata is in London with more on this. So Charlie, I can't imagine if you can list this off in a short period of time, but what are the immediate challenges